Hi everyone! This speech wants to share an important part of my research on curses in Old Norse prose literature. Specifically, I am examining a corpus of 69 curses in over 50 sagas, written down between the 13th and the 15th centuries. Considering specific parameters such as the period of the saga's composition, the narrative's temporal setting, and the components of the magical performance described, I am analyzing how curses change, matching the evolution of Old Norse literature after the long and gradual process of Christianization and the influences of other medieval European cultures. In this speech, I will show you some examples of curses, highlighting particular elements of each performance. They meet the conditions I have selected for constructing the classification I propose in this talk, and after that I will make some considerations and final observations. In the following slides, I will show you 3 curses taken from 3 sagas, which are Bosa Saga och Herrauds, Egil Saga Skallagrimssonar, Havardar Saga Hisvirdings. It is necessary to clarify that although we can assume that some form of cursing performances were used in Middle Ages, we should consider that curses in the Old Norse sagas are narrative representations and they do not refer to practical use in real life. They are literary devices working into the plot, and they can be studied using tools typical of literary studies. Each of these curses represent a crucial point within the narrative. They cause repercussions for both who receive and who pronounce them, and they change the storyline. First of all, let's see in what context curses are used. So, in the first example, in the Bosa Saga, we have King Hringr who sentences Harald and Bosi to death, and that's why Busla curses King Hring to force him to let Harald and Bosi free. And the result is that Harald and Bosi are not executed, and they must face an adventurous journey to get the king's forgiveness. In the second example taken from Egil Saga, we have Egil, who is banned from Norway thanks to the Norwegian royals, so King Eirik and Queen Gunhild. And that's why Egil curses the rulers to be banished from the reign as well. The result is that the rulers will be defeated by King Haakon and forced to leave Norway. In the last example, so in the Havardar Saga, we have Thornbjorn, who kills Olav, who is the son of Bjargey and Havard, who are the main protagonists, the main characters of the saga. That is why Bjargey, who is a witch, curses the murder of her son, and the result is that Havard, who is Bjargey's husband, can kill Thornbjorn. After this brief introduction about the saga and the situation in which curses act, we will read in English translation the passages examined. And I'd like to clarify that the first example, so the curse of Busla, includes in total 9 stanzas, but I will consider just 3 of them. So, from the Bosa Saga, that evening Busla appeared in the king's bedroom and recited a prayer which has been known as Busla's prayer ever since. Here lies Hring, Gotland's king, the stubbornest man when in the wrong. He'll be the one to kill his own son, beyond belief yet on every tongue. Demons will scatter, all values shatter, cliffs will tremble to their knees, storms will bather, crash and clatter, unless with Harald you make peace and let my Bosi live at ease. From the second saga, so Egil Saga, he took a hazel pole in his hand and went to the edge of a rock facing inland. Then he took a horse's head and put it on the end of the pole. Afterwards he made an invocation, saying, Here I set up this corn pole and turn its corn upon King Eirik and Queen Gunhild. Then he turned the horse's head to face land. And I turn its corn upon the nature spirits that inhabit this land, sending them all astray so that none of them will find its resting place by chance or design until they have driven King Eirik and Gunhild from this land. Then he thrust the pole into a cleft in the rock and left it to stand there. He turned the head towards the land and carried the whole invocation in runes on the pole. The last example, taken for the Havardar Saga. On a day in summer, as they rowed out to the sea, they saw a craft coming east up the firth, and they knew that it was Thornbjorn and his kinsmen. Then Bjargey said, "Now we shall take up our lines and row to meet Thornbjorn, for I would see him. You shall row towards the cutter's beam, and I will talk with him a little, while you row about the craft." They did so and rowed toward the cutter. Thorall, who is a friend of Bjargey, Thorall had by now rowed all about the cutter. Bjargey had a bag in her hands and waved around the boat. So, when she had what she wanted, they bent to their oars and rowed off all they might. So, we can make several considerations by looking at the examples given. First of all, we can deduce that the curses use the same narrative structures as well. Each performance is preceded by background events and involves consequences. So we can identify 3 stages that determine the length of time in which a curse can act. We have a background, that is the preparatory moment, where all the participants to the situation are presented and the triggered motivation is explained. We have the event, that is the core of the cursing performance. The performers utter the curse or make rituals, and they try to turn the reality into their favor. The last stage is the result, and that is when the curse acts or fails and the consequences emerge. If the curse succeeds, then the reality changes due to the performer's will. And in many cases, this moment modifies the narrative development of all the saga. And in all the curses, in all the sagas that I am analyzing, the curses always succeed. These steps structurally unite all the curses, but at the same time distinguish them, making each performance unique, considering its narrative content, as we can see from the table, where we have the 3 moments, which therefore represent the standard structures of the curses, and their contents, which differ according to the saga. It is crucial to know the elements involved when the curse is pronounced and performed. It is also necessary to know the moments that precede and follow the performance to understand if the curse has an effect or not and why the performer has used it. This last element in particular will be fundamental in the construction of the classification that I will talk about in this talk. So, analyzing the corpus of curses, I have identified elements that further connect the texts. They regard both the text structures, since they concern the form of the curse as text, and text contents, so the narrative variables inserted within the storyline. They are parameters that allow me to classify curses into 5 groups, and the parameters are reason, so why a curse is used, victims, so against whom a curse is used, mode of execution, so how the curse is performed, reproduction of the curse, in particular reproduction of the utterance within the narration, and the textual genre of the curse. And we will now try to identify them within the three representative examples proposed before. Unlike premonitions, the curse aims to modify reality intentionally. So performers can act driven by two motivations, either as a means of punishment or coercion. In the first case, they react badly to something that happened because of their victim and want revenge. For instance, in the Egil Saga, so the second example, Egil casts a curse upon the Norwegian royals because they banished him from the reign, so he wants to get revenge. And this is the motivation who let Bjargey curse Thorbjorn, because she wants to get revenge. Secondly, a performer can use a coercive curse to obtain something from someone, and it is the case of the curse that Busla casts on King Hring to let Harald and Bosi free. And we can see this from the structure of the curse, because she said, this will happen to you unless you will do this. So it's a way to obtain something from the king. Based on this difference, a curse can be spontaneous or planned. The first one is caused by anger, while the second one is driven by desire and yearning. And this is the first group of the classification that involves spontaneous or planned curses. All the curses are addressed against someone or something. In the Norse sagas, the curses are directed more towards people and objects. Nevertheless, there are cases when animals are also involved. In the examples shown, we have curses directed towards people: Busla against King Hring, Egil against the Norwegian royals, and Bjargey against Thorbjorn. However, as can be seen in the Buslubuen, so in the Busla's curse, objects and animals that represent a person's social status are also affected. For example, in this case, we have a curse towards the horse, the sheep, the throne, and even the bridal bed. So not only they are symbols of Hring's kingship, but also of his manhood, So the second group of the classification involves curses against a person, an object, or an animal. All the curses have three ways of execution. The vocal performance is when the performers use just their voices to cast the spell upon someone, and no other elements are described, and this is the case of Busla's curse. The physical performance is when the performers make some actions during the cursing ritual, but they do not speak a word, and this is the case of Bjargey's curse, where she doesn't speak, doesn't say anything, but just acts. The mixed performance is when the performers use both voices and actions to spell someone, and this is the case of Egil's curse. So, the third group of the classification involves vocal, physical, and mixed curses. Curses can integrate it into the narration in the form of direct or indirect speech. The first one reproduces exactly the dialogue between the performer and the victim, and it is mentioned in quotation marks, as in this example or in the second one, and it is preceded by the form he said, she said, so in Old Norse, han, hon, kvad, or ok, met, kiswa, etc., as we can see from the examples as well. In the last example, since the cursor does not pronounce, does say anything, there is just a simple description of the ritual. But there is a second way of curse The second one is when a performance utterance is reported in summary by the narrator or by one of the characters who speak. And an example is present in the Egil Saga, and it reports the curse that Queen Gunhild addresses to Egil. And as we can see from this example, it is often introduced by the form "Zwa sagt at," so it is said that. And the fourth group of the classification involves direct or indirect speech curses. The last group concerns the textual genre in which the curse presents itself within the text of the saga. And there are two types of genres. The first consists of a text in verse using the skaldic or the Eddic style, as in the case of Busla's curse, the first one. Poetical curses are rich in rhetorical elements and mythical references, and they often present a very complex writing technique, making them difficult to understand. They frequently use two types of verses to emphasize the entire stanzas, the entire composition. The Galdralag verse, also known as the magic spell meter, and the Dradkvet, that is the most used skaldic verse. By the way, they are less used than the prosaic curses in Old Norse sagas. The last ones are usually easy to understand, as we can say from the example taken from Egil Saga. So they are very simple to understand, and they are most of all they are short composition, short curses, and their syntactic construction is linear and straightforward. And we have the standard structure of the period with subject, verb, object, and then other complements. So the fifth and the last group of the classification involves poetical and prosaic curses. Therefore, this is the final and complete classification, which I am basing part of my research on. So we have spontaneous or planned curses, curses against a person, an object, or an animal, vocal, physical, and mixed curses, direct or indirect speech curses, poetical and prosaic curses. As I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, the three examples discussed represent a much larger corpus of 69 curses. However, they are significant because they allow me to make some observation valid for the entire corpus. It must be considered that a curse does not fall only into a specific category. For instance, the direct ones, whose structure can be more carefully analyzed, present all the parameters listed above. Therefore, a curse can be direct, prosaic, spontaneous, verbal, and directed towards a person. Each curse combines the various parameters I have listed, and therefore it fits into the various types just described. Almost all of the curses' victims are people. They represent either an obstacle for the cursor or the leading cause of all is evil. As for objects as victims of curses, we have few cases. However, there are some peculiarities. The objects are often linked to the exercise of power. Weapons are precious objects such as rings or bracelets owned by a ruler or a hero or a fighter. Moreover, weapons have their proper names as they are personified. These elements should not be strange, especially if we consider that one of the characteristics of curses is that they are always addressed to someone, and calling into question or naming the cursed object is fundamental for the effectiveness of the rite. Finally, all the curses of the corpus are narrative devices, and they are functional to the saga's storyline. They always succeed and influence the plot of the saga. The proposed classification is significant for the type of analysis I am carrying out on curses. It allows me to compare the texts with each other. The comparative method is essential for identifying the standard elements among the curses examined. This kind of analysis is even more effective if combined with the studies about the saga's genre and typologies, which I am also considering as well. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you for the panel on Wednesday afternoon. Bye!